Tom, we have a what they call a tentative settlement in the Peace Act strike. My question is this a win for the government or not?
This is definitely a win for the government because the Trudeau Liberals get to say, we respected the union's right to bargain collectively. We sat down, we hammered out a deal, and we weren't pushovers. You know, Trudeau has a reputation for not being much of a manager. So for him to say, look, I pushed back, I didn't give them what they were asking, they went out on strike. So I think that overall, the Liberals come away smelling like roses on this one.
Okay, that's something we don't get to say very often.
Is it a good deal?
It's a very good deal. They went from 3 to 4 years, which was smart because, of course, 2 of it was retroactive anyway. So if they had only signed a 3-year deal, we would have almost immediately started bargaining for the next one. There's some stuff that has to be hammered out. It's not in the collective agreement, as Mona Fortier said about 12 times during her press conference this afternoon.
So true.
But they do have a side agreement to start looking at, okay, what are the rules going to be? How do you determine? It's going to be an employer's right. You're not going to put it in the collective agreement. You're not going to make it a labor right. But there's a new world that we live in. Since the pandemic, we found out that a heck of a lot of work can be done from home. And, you've got to make sure that you have a place of work, that there's a collegiality there, that there's a sense of common purpose, and they have to go into the office sometimes. But how many times? That's the type of thing that they're going to be hammering out. By the next collective agreement, they'll have more information on that.
Okay, I want to touch on something we talked about earlier, this idea that there is a Liberal caucus, I guess, on the weekend, yet the Prime Minister is in New York. He was there, of course, a couple of days ago. And now the deal is, or I guess something is being made of the fact that he's chosen to be there rather than show up for the Liberal caucus, and this is not a good sign.
And then the coronation happening this
Sorry,
weekend.
the coronation, right.
Well, they're having a little ceremony. I got my invitation. I don't know if you guys
Yeah, we all have ours.
Well, the funniest thing was Catherine got invited before I did, so that was the best in our house. So that became a bit of a joke in-house. Look, Pablo Rodriguez is holding a big thing, and people are going to swear allegiance to King Charles. Who knew? It sort of fell out of favor here in Quebec during the last round after the new government was elected in October. Frankly, I think that we're just going to be inundated with images of this. I'm not too sure what the whinging is about Trudeau, because, of course, there's this massive national Liberal convention coming up in Ottawa later this week, and that's going to be retaining all of our attention. I wrote about that on the CTV website because yesterday Vashti Tapellos did an extraordinary turn interviewing Mark Carney, who refused to say whether he thought that Justin Trudeau was the right person to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next campaign. And, of course, we all know that Mark Carney's got a lot of ambition to hold that top job. And by the way, I think he's absolutely extraordinary guy. But it's the only party in the House of Commons of the 5 parties. It's the only one never to have had a woman leader. So I think that people like Chrystia Freeland are going to be looking to take a run at it. Maybe another woman like Anita Anand. Who knows? But who's going to get to have a fireside chat with Hillary Rodham Clinton? None other than Chrystia Freeland.
Well,
so they're going to be up
to
on
your
stage
point,
together.
though, Tom, so is he making a mistake, Justin Trudeau, by not being there?
He's going to be at that big convention, for sure, because he's going to be giving a keynote. So, yes, he's going to be there.
Okay, I thought the idea was he was
gonna miss
choosing
it
one over
because of
the
the
other because of the
coronation.
coronation, right?
Well,
Not the same thing. Okay.
Maybe my information is wrong. I didn't understand that he was going to skip the whole Liberal National Convention.
We'll find out, but I guess the idea here being is, Mark Carney's sniffing around, and we know where Chrystia Freeland stands. What would it take for there to be some sort of a coup?
Yeah, I mean, if he were to skip out, yes, completely, because he had to be in London. And I don't even know if he should have gone to London, to be honest with you. I think that times have changed. He talked about, in glowing terms about Queen Elizabeth II, saying that she was the greatest person he had ever met in his life. It's fine. But does he say and feel the same thing about King Charles? And is it really the place of the Prime Minister of an important democracy like Canada to go and profess fealty to the King? It's such an anachronism. I think that we're due for a conversation about this, but you don't have to throw out the constitutional order. You can do like the Aussies, who just made sure that King Charles is not going to take the Queen's place on their banknotes. We can do similar things like that. Maybe one of the things that he could have done was simply not go to this thing.
Wow.
Because it's going to be so overwrought. I mean, I was just looking at the pictures of the carriage. The whole thing is, It's borderline ridiculous, frankly.
But can you imagine if he didn't go, though? What kind of shaming he would be in for?
Well,
he knows the same thing that everybody knew. Jack Layton, who was, a dyed-in-the-wool lefty, a true, socialist, really had always. Anytime this subject came up, he would look at people and say, "My grandmother's maiden name was England, and for about 15% of Canadians, this is incredibly important, and we're not going to isolate them. We're not going to turn our backs on them, and we're not going to lose those potential votes." So nobody in Canada is going to take the type of step that other countries are taking right now to simply remove the monarchy. But I think at the same time, there are a certain number of things that we can do to show, look, we're a grown-up country. Thank you very much. We can do this on our own.
Well, we'll see how this goes down. While we're talking about trips and not necessarily having the public approval, what do you make about Mayor Valérie Plante flying to Europe and it wasn't made public? It wasn't put on her agenda for the weekend. They're saying it was just human error, Tom.
Well, it's very interesting you say that. First of all, the human error excuse is just pure baloney. It doesn't wash. And why it's important is exactly as you say, Natasha, because when she got elected for the first time in 2017, part of her complaint about Denis Coderre was that he was secretive. Like, for example, he jetted off at one point to Tehran, for heaven's sakes, because he was trying to get the Iranians on board for some sort of conference or some such. And it was a completely bonkers move. But she said, well, he should have the obligation to tell people what he's up to, where he's going. This is a simple trip. She's going to London, Paris, and Vienna, I believe. And so for her to not talk about it, it's simply breaking the promise that she made. I guess, like any other politician, she's in her second term now, and she's going to start breaking promises.
Wow, okay. Coming down a little hard. I'm just thinking to myself, okay, from what I read, and again, this kind of caught some people by surprise because it wasn't telegraphed, is the fact that they're looking at social housing, what some cities are doing in Europe with respect to that. She could have done this, I guess, on a Zoom call, but isn't that kind of just asking a little too much?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. When you're the mayor of, one of the country's second largest city, and, frankly, in the French-speaking world, an extraordinarily important place, you get to travel around. Mayors from other places come here. Politicians travel all the time. So nobody's going to hold that against her. What people are going to be complaining about is what, Natasha and I just mentioned. She said that when Coderre wasn't forthright and transparent about his trips and didn't put them on his public agenda, that he was wrong and that she would remedy that. Mm-hmm. And now we find out that, this is pure malarkey. Oh, the human error. Come on. There's somebody in her staff who's got one job to do, which is to put this stuff out there. And they chose not to because they didn't want to get questions about it. It has nothing to do with human error. Come on.
I forgot I was going to Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah, I think I'm worried about Mayor Plante. I honestly think it has been a bad cycle for her, and it's gone from bad to worse. Let's move on to talking about the minimum wage. So up to $15.25 as of today. We discussed it earlier whether that's enough for people to get by on, given the state of inflation right now. And we heard arguments on both sides that no, it's absolutely not enough. But then conversely, it's incredibly hard on small businesses. Where do you stand on this, Tom?
Well, I mean, it's more than a 7% increase from where we were, which is kind of good because of the inflation that we just went through. And by the way, very few employers are actually paying the minimum wage anyway. Mm-hmm. To get people to hand out bread behind a counter in a bakery, you're paying $20 an hour. I have a friend who's got a restaurant up north, and they have to pay over $20 an hour for people just to, les plongeurs, the divers, people doing the cleaning up in the kitchen. So the minimum wage, they'll tell you that there are a couple of 100,000 people in the province earning that. Fair enough. For them to be getting an extra buck, nobody can begrudge that. And there is no argument to be made that this is going to feed inflation.
It's interesting. We had people on both sides of this issue, and I understand you kind of set yourself up for that. There are people who think this is not even close to what call a living wage. That argument's been going on. I think our guest said they've been asking for this to go to $15 for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yes. Yeah.
I ran in the 2015 campaign. We ran on raising the federal minimum wage, which applies in places like the ports and in airports and things like that, to $15 an hour. We wanted to be a signal that everybody should raise it to 15. So now we've blown right past that. Because of last year's much higher than usual inflation.
Well, and so they were arguing 18, and now she says that simply wouldn't even be enough. It's got to be in the 20s.
And do you buy that argument, Tom, that all this does, if you keep raising the minimum wages, it makes goods more expensive to buy because people have to then, of course, do what they have to do to stay in business, and that's the only way to do it? What's the take here from you?
No, that's completely true. And it is absolutely true that businesses have to stay in business. And if they're paying more for wages, one of two things going to happen. They're going to reduce the number of employees, or they're going to be paying them more, and they're going to have to pass that along to their buyers, to their consumers, clients. No question about that. But that's not a cycle. I mean, the good detailed analysis that's been done of this stuff by the best economists is that that's mostly a canard pushed by the chambers of commerce and so forth. In reality, you could easily go to 16 or 17 bucks an hour without it having any real effect, because talk to somebody who has a bakery, talk to somebody who pays people behind the counter. They're all getting 16, 17 bucks an hour. The real question now is, because I was talking to a young person over the weekend, and at the bakery where they work, they were already getting 16.5 bucks an hour because they couldn't hire anybody for less than that. And I said, well, are you going to get the extra buck? Well, no, because I'm making more than the minimum wage. I said, well, they just increased that by a buck. Maybe you should get something as well. So we'll see whether that works out.